Hello friends, my name is Dan McGuire and I am here today to talk to you about anxiety, depression, and what happens when that whole process starts to take over. So first off, I just want to put a caveat out there. I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist. With that being said, I've dealt with anxiety and depression almost my entire life and have gone through the ups and the downs and have learned quite a bit about it in my own journey. And because of that, I have found that I feel that I have a perspective that's not necessarily unique, but is a perspective that is becoming really important because so many students now struggle with anxiety and depression. Because so many students deal with this now, I feel that it's worth talking about and raising awareness, as well as talking about different things that you can expect when your students struggle with anxiety and depression, as well as some ways to help deal with it. And that's really what this video series that I'm going to do is about. It's about raising awareness on what actually happens to somebody once they enter that state of anxiety, which has many different levels, and the effects that depression can have when mixed with anxiety, and then different things that you can do to help in acute situations when you're dealing with panic attacks, as well as more long-term things when you have students that just kind of struggle with this, whether it be situational or something chemical in the brain or in the body. Regardless of what it is, there's different things that can be done that you can advise your students, because one of the really neat things about our profession is that we really get to know our kids. And there are a lot of times where perfectly good parents and kids from loving homes, they'll deal with this, and the parents just don't know what to do. And when you all you know is that you don't know much, having a teacher there that, number one, is invested in your child, but then also number two, is armed with some knowledge to help, it can make the difference in a child's life. So let's talk really quick about what you can expect and what's going on with a student when you have something acute happen. By acute, we're talking about panic attacks. They can be major, they can be a little more mild. Again, these aren't clinical terms. This is just my own experience and what I've dealt with and what I've seen in my students. And what's going on with them, and then some things that you can do to help. So first off, whenever a student kind of enters a panic attack, kind of what's happening, it's really the fight or flight response. And that's when that anxiety starts to really kick in. And what the body undergoes some changes, some very natural things that help keep us alive, and it's just kicking in at the wrong time in the wrong way. And that's really what is going on with this. Anxiety is not a bad thing. It helps push you. It helps keep you alive. That's what those mechanisms are for. And in normal reactions, it occurs whenever you need that jolt, whether you're in danger or whether you just have a lot on your plate. And those are very natural reactions. What happens with individuals that have anxiety disorders is that system kind of goes haywire and it doesn't shut down. And it fires at weird times in inappropriate ways. So what's actually going on with an individual when they start to have a panic attack? You'll notice that the breathing gets really shallow. The oxygen level kind of gets a little bit lower in the brain, and we kind of go to a more base instincts. So higher order thought, making sure that my taps are low, making sure that I'm phrasing things the right way. That becomes just about impossible as your brain starts to shut down and you just go to some very base level instincts. Blood starts to pull back from the skin, and the pupils sometimes will dilate, and it's just, kids will see spots. If you ever have a kid that talks about how they see spots when they play, chances are it's got to do with their breathing, and that will oftentimes be because of some type of anxiety response. So it's really easy to get frustrated with our students when we feel like we've prepared them and they know the material, they can play it lights out, and then you get into that setting where you're trying to record a tape or you're just having a performance. And even though to most people there's nerves, just about everyone gets nerves, but that one child that just shuts down, this is something worth looking at. And so, what are some things that you can do when that anxiety attack rolls in to kind of knock it out and stop it in its tracks? So the first one is deep breathing. One of the body's responses to this type of anxiety is to take in oxygen in a different way. The breathing becomes very shallow, and by breathing deeply to the bottom of your lungs and filling up your entire lungs with air, it starts to signal to the body, we're okay. We are all right. Even though the body is acting like a lion is getting ready to eat us. You really don't have to worry. That's what you're signaling to your body when you start taking in those deep breaths. And a really good exercise is to breathe in for 4, hold it for 5, and exhale for 7. And that has 2 different effects. Number one, it starts to calm the body down by pulling in deep breaths, and it also distracts the mind, because one of the things that people with anxiety disorders will have is just their brain is constantly in overdrive. It cannot shut off. And chances are it's not thinking about anything good. It's thinking about the worst things, the things you don't want to think about. That's what's going on in the brain. Even though you're thinking to yourself, I got to stop thinking about this. It doesn't work that way. It's just not that simple. And so it gets the brain focusing on the actual counting and the numbers and remembering which one you're on. Now, chances are, when you start doing this with somebody, they're going to screw it up. They're going to have a really hard time doing it. That's kind of the idea, is that you're getting their brain to focus on something other than whatever it is they're having the anxiety about, and getting them into a more neutral kind of state where the brain can kind of start taking back over, and we're getting out of this fight or flight response. Another thing that you can do, it's a combination of a couple different exercises that I learned from a licensed therapist here in Johnson City. So the first one is you put your finger about this far from the face, about that far, and you go back and forth, and you just have them follow your finger, just like this. And as you're talking to them about this, try to keep your voice very calm, very relaxed, and don't move very fast, but try and keep it a little bit more still, a little bit more relaxed, and then encourage them to breathe deeply. And all we're doing here is we're getting the breathing under control, and we're doing something they can see to get their brain focused on this point right here, the tip of the finger. And then alternate that and have them look at your finger. Now look at the wall behind my finger. Now go back and forth between those. Back and forth. And again, just talking to them about breathing deep and slowing the breath down, because chances are if they're in this state, that breathing's pretty fast and it's really shallow. And we want them just to slow that breathing down and start to breathe deeply. These 2 things, the tail wag, the finger wag, and going back and forth between finger and something back in the distance behind it, can really snap anyone out of a panic attack. Another really good thing is to have them count backwards from 100 by 7s. Even if they get it wrong, so long as they're trying to think and count, again, we're just breaking the cycle. We're snapping the body out of this kind of loop that it's trapped in, and getting them to try and calm the breathing down and take big, deep breaths, and getting the brain focused on something other than whatever they're panicking about. So those are 3 different quick things that you can do to break a student out of an acute anxiety situation, a panic attack. Now, if it's a bad situation, you got to really use your own judgment here, and you got to kind of figure out what's going on. Once you break that panic attack, talk to them. What's going on? What's causing this? They might not know, but a lot of the times you'll get some type of insight into what's going on. It could be something at home that's just manifesting at school in rehearsal. It could be that they're having a bad day and it just crept up on them. It could be something they deal with a lot. And knowing that can help dictate how you respond so that you're responding out of kindness and out of the best interest for the student. The realization that what's best for the student and what's best for the ensemble is that that student be in as good a place as possible in order to make rehearsal as efficient as possible. Sometimes just that student getting out there, putting on their pants, and being out in the rehearsal space or out on the field, sometimes that's a victory. And you got to keep that in mind when you're working with them. Sometimes you can ask students to do a little bit more, but generally, once a student has entered this fight or flight response state, asking them to be really effective for the rest of the rehearsal is probably unrealistic. So these are things to keep in mind as you're dealing with your students. My name's Dan McGuire. So happy to share this with all of you, and I hope this helps, and I hope that this video and the others that I'll be making will give you the opportunity to help your students and anyone else you might know that struggles with anxiety and depression. Until next time.